everyone. A big welcome back to I forgot where I was then. You call your podcast by your own name, but as you all guys know that I don't actually edit anything. So we're going to start again, but keep this in because it's funny. 3, 2, 1. Hello, welcome to the Nick Elston Show. This is season 5 and episode 18. I have an amazing guest to bring you today, as in truly amazing guest to bring you today, in the shape of David Beeney. Big round of applause for David. Woo! Hello.
Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much. Slowly kind of messing myself up. But, you know, we were just talking before we hit record, ego-free world of speaking. This is what you're going to get. I'm going to keep all the mistakes in because we never get a go round in live audiences, do we? So,
Nope.
so we're going to do this. David Beeney, mental health speaker, passionate champion for positive well-being, and also the founder of his own organization as well. Welcome to the show. Tell us who you are, kind of what you do, and where you are from in the UK as well.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for the opportunity to be on your podcast today. I'm in Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire, and a little bit about me. I spent most of my life working in magazines and newspapers, having a fairly normal career, but I had a big secret. And what was my big secret? My big secret was I was battling in private with panic attacks and anxiety. My life changed forever, Nick, on the 16th of May, 2016, when I outed myself about my mental health, and it's changed my life.
Amazing.
When I first shared my story, it resonated with more people and at a deeper level than anything I've ever done before. However, a lot of people came to me and said, can I be honest with you too? I'd say yes, of course. And they'd say things like, I would never share my mental health at work. And the more and more people I spoke to about my mental health, the more people shared with me that, in short, they didn't trust their employers. So I made a big decision, Nick, back in 2017, that where I was going to focus my energy was on helping employers to become kinder. I wanted to help employers to create cultures at work where every single person would feel safe to talk about their mental health. And that's led me on a hell of a journey that you and I admire each other from afar these days. But I've been doing it 6 years today, Nick. And,
congratulations. Very much congratulations. It's like a long distance version of Blind Date, isn't it? That kind of the mutual love in the room is awesome today.
Well, I was saying to you earlier, Nick, that in my first year, when the phone hardly ever rang and didn't get that many emails coming in, you were one of the first people ever to get in contact with me. And we had a really good chat, and we connected very well on that day. And I remember thinking that Nick Elston's going to be around for a long time doing this, because you were so authentic, so passionate. I've had so many people contact me over the years, and with all due respect, most people I never hear from again. These are people who say they want to get involved in the sort of work that you and I do. But for the last 5 years, I see you popping up everywhere, and people say great things about you. So when the chance to come on your podcast today, I jumped at it.
Oh, thank you. And genuinely, the appreciation is mutual, that the amount of clients I've been at and actually said, because obviously I speak about kind of agendas and what they got coming up and what's gone before, and so that I can signpost back in. And we'll talk about that bit very soon as well, because I think that's the great thing about kind of what we both do differently, is that, yeah, you feature very heavily. And I think that's such a great thing. So I know you do great work. Also your use of props, I believe, as well, but we'll come on to that too. But there's so many, I knew this would happen with us. There's so many rabbit holes that have opened almost immediately with this. And I think the first one actually that you touched on so kind of eloquently is that we're kind of trained in corporate and professional environments to deliver superficial messages, aren't we, in that sense? And so when you come away from that and started to deliver authenticity and even vulnerability with a small capital V at the time, actually you do connect with people a lot deeper, faster and stronger than you would any kind of superficial message, don't you?
Absolutely, Nick. I honestly spent 36 years trying to avoid public speaking in the corporate world because I had this real issue around controlling my breathing. And I never thought I could do what I do now. People obviously say to me, well, you seem authentic, David. How can you stand up and deliver talks to very large audiences? And I think it's because I truly accept it's okay not to be okay. So I'm finally comfortable being me after a long period of not being comfortable being me. As you and I know, we inspire people when we share vulnerability. It takes courage to share vulnerability, and that also helps me get through my talks. And thirdly, it's my discovery of self-compassion. I've spent most of my life panicking about my panic attacks. I now give myself permission to have them, with the irony being, the moment I give myself permission to have them, I reduce the chances of them happening. I wish I discovered that many, many years ago, but it's the energy I get back from audiences. It's the fabulous feedback I get that's so humbling, like that you get as well, that inspires me to do this sort of work. Every day, I still take myself out of my comfort zone. I'm doing a talk at 12 o'clock today, and it never goes away. I'm thinking, oh, David, please don't have an attack today. But I know I won't.
Actually, I think that's a really interesting point. Sorry to jump in there. I think that's a really interesting point, is that actually some of that is what you harness to deliver as effectively as you do, right? Because it's that kind of nervous energy, excitement kind of thing going on. There's a real fine tipping point between the two, isn't there? And actually without that, maybe the drive to deliver wouldn't be as strong as it obviously is with you.
You're spot on. Of course, there's such a fine line between fear and excitement. And I know there's, once I get up and running, I love an audience. I love being on stage. I love holding court. I've always been a storyteller. So in some ways, this is so cathartic for me. It's so purposeful. And I've never been so as happy in my work as I am now.
Amazing.
And long may that continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can feel it as well when you talk about this stuff. And I think you're right. When you've got that flow with an audience, it's the closest thing I get to kind of euphoria or faith, kind of in terms of what I do, is when you feel it. I think certainly over the lockdown years, virtual was good enough. But even as an introvert, kind of, I love what I do, but there's a quiet, dark corner of the world I sit in afterwards and get my energy back. Even as an introvert, I really miss that human dynamics, the energy element of delivery. And especially given that your focus is more solution focused than you have done counseling work for organizations, you focus on culture change, which is not something that I focus on. And I think actually that's what really complements what we both do, but also why you are very good at what you do as well, because it drives true positive culture change, your approach.
Yeah, I'm where I'm lucky. I never set out to do the work that I do now. And as you say, I wear 3 different hats. Yes, I'm someone like you who shares my own mental health story. And I think that gives me real connection with audiences. I'm a qualified mental health counsellor, and I still do counselling every week. But I also, I spent most of my life in workplaces trying to create cultures where people flourished. And I guess I bring those 3 together, which makes me fairly authentic at my work.
Absolutely.
And as you've touched on, Nick, as well, it's great to be working in person again. Yes, we've learned to work virtually, but I don't know about you. I do enjoy more being in person with people. And in the early days of working virtually, a number of businesses actually used platforms where you couldn't see anybody.
Yeah, I remember those.
You could talk, you could see your slides or whatever, but you couldn't see anybody. And interestingly, I'm due to do one of those talks next week for an organization I think you work for as well sometimes.
Okay.
And they still use platforms where you can't see people. And I say to them, for the sake of my own mental health, I'm more likely to have a panic attack if I can't see anyone.
Yeah. But that's the bit where we fill in the gaps, isn't it? That's kind of like you end up laughing at your own jokes, which I'm really good at anyway. But you're kind of trying to second guess how an audience would react if you were in front of them. It's a strange reality when you start doing it that way, isn't it? Absolutely.
One very quick story for you that stuck in my head last week. I was delivering a workshop last week, and after about an hour, we had a break. And when we started again after the break, there was a lady suddenly sitting next to me who I was convinced hadn't been in the room for the first hour. And normally, if someone joins you after the first hour, they sort of say, sorry, I couldn't be here for the first hour. But I didn't want to accuse her of being late, so I didn't really know what to say. So I sort of said to her cheekily, I said, excuse me, were you sitting somewhere else in the room and I didn't spot you, or have you just turned up? And she completely openly said, I've just turned up. I was walking my dog. So now that then made me think, because I was expecting her to say, I've been at a hospital appointment,
Yeah.
I've been at the doctor's, I've had a major client meeting. I wasn't expecting her to say that she'd been walking the dog. I then tried to convince myself that maybe the dog was very poorly and she had to walk the dog at that time every day. Anyway, to cut this story short, when the workshop had finished, she came up to me and said, just to say to you, the reason I was walking my dog for the first hour of your workshop today was I was more interested in walking my dog. I had no real interest in your workshop, but having attended the last 2 hours of it, I now wish I'd been there for all three. It was actually really good.
You should use that as like a review, so looking like the movie headlines, better than walking your dog. Use it is an asset, mate. Absolutely use it. I love that. And I think that it's something that I want to kind of go down. I'll go down kind of later on, actually, around going down this road of being a professional speaker, the perception and how you kind of get into it. And maybe we can throw in some tips around how people can start to go down that road. But there is this assumption that it's just a case of rocking up and telling people your story. And it's a very different reality than that. Even if you're confident with public speaking, when you start to deliver your own personal experience, that there's so many more things in play with that, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, Nick, one of the ironies is we've known each other for 5-6 years, but I've actually never seen you perform, and I'm not sure you've ever seen me.
Likewise, yeah.
But I know that because
there's an opportunity there. Sure, we can get something. Collaboration, definitely.
Absolutely, because you're someone who coaches people in public speaking, and I would imagine that you're better on your feet than I am. But yeah, I've had to.
Better is a very subjective word.
Very subjective, very subjective. But every day's been a school day for me in recent years in terms of the work that I do. When we first went virtual, fortunately it wasn't my client, but I helped somebody else with a client deliver a virtual session, and we tried to do it exactly as if we were in the room, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
I learned so much that day. And as I say, fortunately for me, it wasn't with one of my own clients, but it was, but yeah, we're learning all the time, Nick. We're learning all the time with this.
We are. I think we actually also forget kind of how, I'll use the word weird, how weird it is to actually do this as a job as well, especially the speaking element. I was delivering it's not mental health work, it's public speaking stuff that I do. I was delivering a new program to HMP Five Wells last week, not too far from you, I guess, Northants kind of way. Yeah. And one of the prisoners said to me, he said, "What? So you actually get paid just to stand up and talk?" I went, "Actually, when you put it that way, it's actually mind blowing, isn't it?" It's not something you ever aspire to be as a kid or something, but it's just something you kind of end up doing, I guess.
It's really weird because I again have seen that you've worked with some amazing organizations, and like you, I sometimes pinch myself. I remember standing delivering a talk for the Royal College of Surgeons, thinking, how am I delivering a talk to all these medical experts in the world, yet I know nothing about sort of it was just huge imposter syndrome.
Beautiful venue as well, isn't it? There,
amazing venue, absolutely
so good, yeah.
Amazing venue. I still pinch myself, and it does feel weird that this is my job because I never set out to do this sort of work.
I think that's an interesting one actually, because I think it may be different for kind of like yourself because you do cover kind of more solution focused stuff too, but there are two extremes that people kind of can sometimes give you when you say you're talking about mental health, and not to be too generalist, but very much in the traditional businesses, so like law or all the spaces that we work in, you very often get that reaction, well, he's here to fix, this is going to be dry, heavy, stroke, boring, stroke, I don't want to be fixed, I get very defensive, or they think I'm going to be running around with a joss stick naked with the fire outside kind of thing. And somewhere in between's the truth, I'm up for anything, mate. But the point is that it's the lived experience that seems to get the engagement, so people feel empowered to reach out for the solutions. Now, you have all of those kind of under your hat, which is an amazing thing. But some of the environments that we both work in and operate in are high-pressure environments. They are frontline services. So people that actually know what to do in any given situation, but they still find that it's the storytelling, it's a lived experience, it gets the engagement with you. Do you find that as mind-boggling with your counsellor head on as you do with your speaker head on?
I do. I'll try and choose my words a little bit carefully here, but I was listening last week to the amount of GPs who are considering quitting their work due to the pressures of the job. And I've also read somewhere at some stage that the suicide rate among male GPs is incredibly high. Now, you would like to think that a doctor would be aware of when they're working too hard, aware of when they need to take breaks, aware of how to manage their stress. But these people don't. And going back to, when you do talks to groups like the Royal College of Surgeons, when you and I tell stories, real life stories that really connect with people, and we're men as well, I think that sometimes really helps connect, with male audiences.
Absolutely.
Particularly. I think we create light bulb moments for people. People come away and think, I never used to think mental health was anything to do with me. I thought it was 1 in 4, but today I've realized it's everything about me.
1 in 1.
I always remember, Nick, one day, a guy in a wheelchair staying behind after one of my talks, and he was very tearful. And he said to me, because I'm in a wheelchair, people have spent most of my life feeling sorry for me because my legs don't work. But he said, listening to you today, I've realized my bigger issue isn't that my legs don't work, it's my mental health. He said, that's where I need real help with. And it was a real moment. And
wow.
Yeah, I think, but I'm sure both of us have had many situations whereby we've just humbly made a real difference for people just by connecting and just being very real about this topic that a lot of people struggle to talk about.
I think so. And I'm sure we're both of the same mindset that the stage, however that looks on the day, is very much still therapy space for me. I will kind of share what's going through my head right now, because actually when you start to kind of play around with it with an audience, not only is it real, but also it means that you can start to see kind of your experience in a more kind of 4D perspective. And from what you said already, that's very much a case for you as well. It's still part of your process in that sense. Is that right to say?
Yeah, I don't underestimate when I've got an audience in front of me that everyone in that audience has got their own battles going on. And occasionally something I'll say, someone's not in the right place to hear that on that day. There was a lady on a webinar a few weeks ago. And at the beginning, I asked people what they found toughest about the last couple of years. And she'd lost 2 very close relatives to suicide. And I remember thinking at the time, today's going to be really tough for you, because I referenced suicide quite a bit. And what you couldn't make up, Nick, was in the middle of that virtual workshop, where I was working is where I am now. And the door opened, and people know if I'm doing one of these, you don't come in that door. But the head of people here opened the door and was just staring at me. And I knew that it must be really serious. And she was making me feel quite anxious, because I didn't know what to do, carry on my virtual workshop to about 20 people, or to actually so I chose to carry on my workshop and thought, I've got a break in 5 minutes. I'll see what's going on then. I then went to find out that someone in this building I'm in now had attempted their own life, and that they wanted me to go and see them. So by now the paramedics had been called. So I chose to finish my workshop that only had about 45 minutes to go, and then go round to see this person who I knew was now in safe hands. So when I kicked off the final 45 minutes of this workshop, in the moment, I shared with my audience what had just happened, because they were aware only a few minutes earlier that someone had tried to interrupt me, and I chose to go on. And I thought, this is so relevant, because the person who's attempted their own life is someone I was talking to only yesterday. And even though I'm a mental health counsellor, I didn't notice anything different about them than normal. But this particular story, the person who I mentioned earlier, who'd lost 2 people to suicide in the last year, who I knew was going to find my workshop tough, this tipped them over the edge. They turned their camera off. They stayed for the rest of the workshop. but we spoke outside of the session, and they said to me, look, I really am now struggling because you brought the subject up so much. I wish there had been more warning about some of your content. And I apologized and said, part of that content today wasn't planned for, but I chose to share it because I thought it was very relevant to my session. And I apologize if it really impacted you and was quite upsetting for you. I also tried to get across in the right way that hopefully what my session has done has made you aware that you do need support on this topic, because it will come up on the TV, on the radio, in the media, and you've had a really tough, couple of years, and you need professional support. But going back to your question, I feel very responsible for what I do, and it's a real challenge. Every day, Nick, is different, and as much as I love what I do, it's a very responsible job as well.
It is, and I think, like you said, and thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think that the safeguarding element cannot be kind of underestimated, and as you don't, obviously, and same here, having that kind of mechanism in place to support people, because what you are sharing potentially can be triggering for people, and can be because what you're doing as a speaker is to sow the seeds of lots of questions, is not to constantly give the answers, because there's no one fix all for everybody. But I think it is one of the kind of the byproducts of what we do, is that you're going to catch people not at great points in their life as well.
Yeah. One of the questions you must get, Nick, as well, when someone books you to do a session, sometimes people say to me, do we make your session mandatory or voluntary? Now, mandatory never feels the right spirit to force people to come and listen to Nick Elston or David Beeney.
Yeah. However,
if they don't get the wording right, the people you really want in the room are the people who don't turn up. Because, if I was going to one of your talks and I was really suffering with anxiety, I may think Nick may say stuff today that triggers things. I'd rather not go. Yeah. But you and I know they're the people who really need to go to the session.
Absolutely.
And it does trigger things, and you do come away thinking, yeah, Nick's really helped me today, but he's also made me realize I need to get some professional support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So taking you way back, because I really want to get as much as we can into this episode, because it's been a long time coming. Tell us about baby David. So take us back, kind of growing up. Where did you grow up? What was education and family life like for you, and your journey to that point of your first step up onto stage or into an audience?
Ironically, Nick, I was born breech, so I came out bum first, and there was the classic line that we've got a bald baby here, before they realised it was my backside. And so years later, when I was suffering with anxiety and tried to wonder where my panic attacks came from, I even wonder if it came from my actual birth. Right. And I was an only child because the birth was so painful for my mother. I grew up in Wembley, not far from the stadium. I was that near the stadium that if there was a game going on and you didn't want to know the score, you'd have to shut the windows because you could hear the crowd singing. So we were that near to Wembley. Enjoyed school. My dad inspired me in life because I just I loved him to bits, Nick, but I didn't want to be anything like my dad. He had no motivation. He worked in the bank. He hated his job, but he stayed in the same bank, in the same job for 45 years before he retired at 59. And I thought, what's different to working in the bank? And I thought advertising and marketing sounds quite interesting. So I ended up in advertising and marketing. And as I say, I spent 36 years there. I wasn't a traditional sales director. I wasn't someone who banged the table, I never thought that was the best way to get the best sales figures. I always thought there's something about the way you treat your people that gets the best out of them. So in many ways, although my work is very different now, I've always tried to get the best out of people by being kind to them. And ironically, my work is now around kind cultures. I had the first time I ever interviewed anyone, I was 24 years old. My career was taking off. And during that interview, when I was interviewing somebody, I had a panic attack. It was the first time I'd had one in a work situation. My boss had to ask me to leave the room because I couldn't continue.
Did you have one at home by that point, or personally? Or
no, I thought I had claustrophobia by now. I think I had what I thought was traditional claustrophobia, but here I was in a work situation whereby panic came from nowhere and I couldn't breathe. And I think it was the only moment in my life I pretended to faint or thought about pretending to faint because I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
I had another interview the following day where I was interviewing again, and it happened again. And this was the darkest time in my life because I thought, I'm 24 years old. I only had to speak to one person for a few minutes, and I couldn't even do that. But little did I know then at 24 years old, I wouldn't talk about what happened that day or the following day for years and years and years. And I found techniques at work to hide what was really going on when I started to feel anxious and have panic attacks. In some ways, my mental health, for the first 10, 15 years of my career, it was my secret weapon. When I look back, I didn't realize it made me more creative. It made me more engaging. But eventually it caught up with me. And I certainly never fulfilled my true potential in the world of magazines and newspapers because I realized the more senior you became, the more public speaking you had to do. And I knew that I couldn't do that sort of work because of my, secret battle with panic attacks. So yeah, and as we said earlier, I think I was 54 years old when I finally outed myself about my mental health, and it's been the best thing I've ever done.
Wow.
But,
so are you truly being heard in life and in business? And think about that genuinely. If the answer to that is no, then you've found the right event. If you want to give yourself that boost personally and professionally, come along to Find Your Voice Live. This will change your life. This will be the game changer that you've been looking for.
It provides me with the confidence in myself to prove to myself that I can do it, I can get up on stage, I can speak.
There's absolutely nothing to be nervous about with these events. It's very, very open, very, very relaxed.
Help my confidence go from here at the beginning of the day to here at the end of the day.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health and a transformational speaking coach. I'm the founder of Forging People, and Find Your Voice Live is our flagship event where we cross the boundaries of personal development, mental health, transformation, and public speaking. Your ability to speak, to deliver any message to any audience with clarity and power and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success by your own definition of that really subjective term. Speaking is life, speaking is business, speaking is education, and that's the thing that we focus on most. What I find is that people are here for many, many different reasons. Some people do absolutely want to be a stage speaker or a professional speaker. Some people want to be able to represent their business or to lead a team or inspire a movement or create a story. But even actually, some people want to be here just because they want to be heard at home. Maybe they don't feel their opinions being heard, that they can't say yes to the things they want to say yes to or no to the things they want to say no to. Again, this is where personal development meets mental health, meets public speaking to create a real positive impact. At the end of Find Your Voice Live, you will walk away with massive confidence around delivering your message. The ability to stand up and deliver means you will enhance your self-esteem in an amazing way. You will also have the skills and tools and tips and techniques to not only deliver a presentation, but to structure a presentation, to find your audience, to be able to deliver emotional storytelling to help your audience feel and make them want to be part of your tribe, make them want to be part of your following, and really tune into what you're truly about, to truly make yourself heard in life and in business. If you're sat on the fence, if you're still not sure, take the model that I use, say yes, worry about it later, and I'll make sure that you're looked after brilliantly. Myself and my team will make sure that you have an amazing day, transformational day that will have the desired positive impact that you want to achieve.
Yep. So
you look a lot younger than what you are, David. This isn't a chat up line or a come on, I promise you. But you do look a lot younger than what you are. Has to be said. So, what about the first time you kind of decided to step up and share your story in an environment where there was an audience of whatever size?
Yeah, I wish I had a better story for this, Nick. I chose to train as a mental health counselor about 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I thought that sounds quite interesting. It's something I'll probably do in later life, one evening a week or something. And I was working at Auto Trader, and I bumped into someone in HR, and they said to me, David, don't you know a bit about mental health? And I went, well, yeah. And they said, well, next month is Mental Health Awareness Week. Why don't you do some talks about mental health in London and Manchester for Auto Trader? The staff would love hearing from you about it. And I felt I was put into a corner, and I couldn't say no, but I hoped it would go away. And a few days later, I got an email saying, please, can you send me your slide deck? And I thought, what slide deck? What am I going to talk about? And in the end, I thought, sod it, I'll talk about me. And I thought, if I talk about me, then perhaps it will be quite engaging. Now, I was being made redundant at the time, Nick. So people have said to me, would I have outed myself about my mental health if I hadn't been being made redundant at the time? And we'll never know the answer to that question. Anyway, I went ahead with those talks. The first time I did it, I broke down emotionally. I didn't know if I could do them. I got through them, and the feedback was such that being made redundant again, I thought, what am I going to do for work? And I thought, hang on, perhaps people, I could earn some money doing this. And that made me laugh, because in the first year of trying to make money doing this, I hardly made any money at all. I thought, oh, within a few months, people will be paying me. It took a lot longer than that to make it a business.
Yeah.
But we got there in the end.
You did. What's been your most enjoyable event so far, for whatever reason?
Most enjoyable event. I've done quite a lot of work with the Royal Navy.
Okay, very cool.
They've proved to be some of the most challenging audiences, because they're mainly men.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one stage during COVID, Nick, where they were still actually doing stuff in person because they could sit people 2 meters apart.
Yeah.
And I remember a day where I was in a huge, almost like hangar on a naval air station base. And I must have had 150 sailors all sitting 2 meters apart. They all had the same black masks on because of COVID.
Yeah.
So all I could see was their eyes. And there was me delivering a talk, speaking for about 45, 50 minutes, just seeing people's eyes staring at me.
Amazing.
But at the end of it, it's obviously, it's very, very rewarding, because again, some of the feedback afterwards from the guys in the Navy, when they could talk to you privately, was like, that was the best hour I've had in the Navy in 16 years.
Wow.
So yeah, really impactful work, but scary at the time.
It's scary as well. It is impactful. It is powerful, and it's amazing to see what you're doing, and in the environments you're doing it as well. And I think that it has to be said still that not exclusively, but actually more so with men talking about this stuff, is still in the minority in that sense. And of course, there's lots of different breakdowns of that, but it's still in the minority to the extent and the reach that we're both doing. So I think it is an important thing that we're doing. As I said right at the beginning, and thank you for sharing your story so far with me as well. I mean, right, I said at the beginning, is that we do get asked a lot, like, how do you do what you do? Or I'm going to do what you do. And then it kind of doesn't seem to last very long, or it doesn't stick. Or like you said, actually the funds run out and actually we have to go back to kind of doing the normal stuff. And I think as somebody, both of us who are people that have been long established doing what we're doing, what would you say your kind of biggest tips are to people looking to set out to share their story on a professional level?
The best tips I've got, I couldn't have done what I do without my sales and marketing background. Yeah,
I agree with that, actually. I'm the same as you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. People don't realize, even to this day, how many businesses and organizations I contact to remind them that what I do. When I first set about this role, I remember drawing up a list of just about everybody I knew. And I thought, I'm going to tell everybody, whether it's over a coffee, a beer, or just a phone call, because the more people I tell, the more chance that someone will call me one day and say, I've heard you do these talks. So behind the scenes, I've really had to work LinkedIn quite hard. LinkedIn's been the key. I tried Twitter in the early days. It didn't really help me business wise. Facebook's a bit of fun and more keeping friends up to date with things. But LinkedIn's been amazing for me. And dare I say it, we touched on it earlier, Nick. I've had to do a lot of work where I don't get paid for. People assume that I'm getting paid for it. And I put stuff on LinkedIn and they think, oh, he's David Beeney's here now. You must be earning a fortune. Not at all.
I think that's such a valid point. I think to start with, actually, the kind of the free work is done through you're building kind of visibility and credibility and everything else. But even now, even though we're both kind of long established doing what we do, that free stuff still plays a big part. I would say that from my case, certainly that I'm more selective about the free stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That there has to be an audience which is a good audience for me. It's kind of the closest I get to networking now, I guess, is to go to those kind of audiences and immerse myself in those kind of audiences. I think there's certainly that. I think the other thing is, from a personal point of view, we both started doing this because it was a personal passion. It was kind of like a mission. So therefore, when money gets thrown into the mix, actually, it took some of the shine away, if I'm honest. So, but as we both know, the mortgage doesn't get paid on dreams and missions, sadly. We did ask, but it didn't happen. And I think that actually it's about building an ecosystem. So just to support your point now, I think it's a case of, over a period of time, is building an ecosystem within the business, which then still fuels that personal passion, but absolutely pays the bills. And there's no shame in the commercial success of what we do either, because actually it empowers us to reach bigger audiences, more people. What I mean by ecosystem is that my corporate clients pay more than my education and prison clients. However, they subsidize the work that I do in those environments. And then collectively, in its entirety, it subsidizes my work that I donate for free to charities and organizations. So therefore, within the ecosystem, you get the kick. And I think that that's a very powerful point you make. Thank you.
No, I just, I've always said, and I mean it, if I could do my work and never charge, I'd have been happy with that, because you made a really good point just now. When you first started charging, it took something away from it. Do you know what? No one's ever said that, but it's true. And
I think niching is important too, isn't it? That you're very, I think we're both very clear about what our niche is in the space. So absolutely, we've got the credibility and the countless kind of reviews and everything else that are fantastic you pick up along the way, and all the videos, images, that kind of stuff. But essentially, it's that kind of, it's being able to really communicate what your niche is. For example, inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. That's the headline on LinkedIn. What I mean is I'm not solution focused. That's kind of a disclaimer in that sense. I'm not I'm not here to fix anybody. And my experience is lived experience, not professionally taught in that sense. So therefore, by communicating that niche, it allows me to work with solution-focused people such as yourself or other mental health or well-being companies. And so actually you enforce, and by design, collaboration over competition. And I think there's so many people that are afraid of collaboration. Weirdly, I'm not sure what you thought about this, but I'll choose what I say carefully here. So given my background in commercial sales, like you, and account management and that kind of stuff, that there's far less competitive in those environments than it is in the well-being space. There seems to be a lot more kind of, I'm going to choose very carefully, a lot more sensitivity and kind of fear around competition and that kind of stuff. And I think for me, it's because we don't really define what our niche is.
Yeah.
By setting that niche, you work out your place in the world. It also means I'm not going in to disrupt any initiatives. I'm there to kind of point to you in that sense. Yeah.
I've always stayed very narrow in what I do, Nick. I know what I'm good at, but I know what I'm not good at. And lots of sort of business people have said to me, David, what you need to get clever at is having that when you win some corporate work, that you've got 6 different modules that you deliver. And I said, but I haven't got 6 modules of content. I keep my work quite simple. My messaging is simple. I'm not going to come up with another 4 or 5 modules just so I can then say to a business, you need to buy the whole package. I stay narrow in what I do, but I know what I do, I'm good at.
Yeah.
And I'm massively into collaboration. I don't worry about other people competing with me because, you've articulated it better than I do today. You know what you're great at, and you're Nick Elston. And I think it was Selco Builders, their well-being strategies called Tell 'em, and tell 'em again. So what they would do is they'd get Nick Elston in 1 year, David Beeney in the next year, and then, someone else, brilliant in the following year, because each one of us who comes in will impact on certain people more than others. And we have our own way of making a difference.
Absolutely. And because it's based on our own experiences, you create a market of one in that sense.
Yeah.
There is no competition in its truest sense of the word. There's no one doing exactly what you do. There's no other David Beeney. And I always remember one of my first mentors said to me that actually run your own race. Like there's a reason why racehorses wear blinkers. There's that one. I think also is the fact that nobody likes a tribute act. Yeah. So if there is somebody trying to behave and act like you and be you, then actually they're still going to want to see the real thing. And I think that's quite important too.
Yeah.
But I absolutely resonate with what you say, because my business coach gets absolutely nuts that I am rubbish at putting together modules and all this different stuff, that I just want to go and do stuff, and then I'm going to come back again and I'm going to do some more stuff. Yeah. And then there's no kind of process in that, but it's kind of the way I work.
Nick, I heard this story second or third hand, so apologies if it's not accurate, but before you came on screen today, I pictured you wearing a hat. Because that's your brand and that's who you are. Yeah. And this is a very old story, but 3 or 4 years ago, I think you went through a small phase of thinking, I need to become more corporate. Yeah. And all of a sudden the hat came off and you tried to become more corporate, but very, very quickly, you either decided yourself or from a coach, that wasn't Nick Elston. Get that bloody hat back on. So I am so pleased today to see you with a hat on.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Being the Nick Elston that I first spoke to many years ago.
Yeah, thank you.
That's you.
I think that's I've never really shared that before. In all honesty, I actually went through a bit of a low point for sure. I was concerned, it was just pre-coaching actually, there was some counselling going on at the time, but I was concerned that the cap was becoming a mask. So which is something that I guard against, is that masking behaviour kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the beard come off, the cap come off, and actually, and God bless him, there's an amazing guy called Graham Ash who, he was at one of the events I was speaking at. I've known him for years. He was a senior person at Clark's, the shoe people. And he said, he dropped me a message, and it's such a blinding flash of the obvious. He said, I saw you today without the cap and without the beard. It wasn't you. You've lost something. And he just called it out as simply, he's very blunt, very as simple as that. And I needed that. And actually, I thought, I'm right. I'm looking in the wrong point. And so I'm so pleased you picked up on that, because I'd never actually shared the reason why that happened. But I think it's also a great example of the fact that very often when we do what we do, both of us, there's going to be this perception as, hallelujah, David's cured. He's up there talking about his stuff. He doesn't get any problems anymore. He blazes through life. He lives in a Disney movie. He never gets blindsided. And that's just not the truth, is it? We still manage our crap to varying degrees of success, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember doing the Train the Trainer course early in my career, and I thought it went okay. And at the end of it, the tutor said to me, David, he said, I'll be honest, I'm disappointed. I put you on last today because I thought you'd entertain, you'd make us laugh. He said it was okay, but it was boring. It wasn't David Beeney. And he said, never, ever again do a presentation that's not David Beeney. And that was many years ago. And but there's been times on my journey with what I do now where I've become a bit too straight at times. And you mentioned props earlier on.
Yes, yeah.
I do get bouncy balls out. I get beans out. And a few years ago, I stopped doing that. But then people have said to me, no, people expect that. It's part of you. Don't get too straight and stuffy, stick to your brand. And you and I have been doing this a long time, and that's a credit to both of us. And I'm sure we always will do this now. But we've got to stay true to our brands and to be as authentic as we can.
I think absolutely right. So what's next for David Beeney?
What's next? I love a phrase, Nick. Walk as far as you can see, and then you can see further. So I stole that, by the way.
If I have that, I'll credit you. I promise.
So I'm just going to keep walking in the direction I'm going in, and see where it all goes.
Brilliant.
I'm six. I turned 60 recently. My plan is,
you got to give me the name of your moisturizer.
I plan never ever to retire. But just gradually scale down what I do. I'd like to think at 80 years old, I'll still be wheeled out for one talk a month, and they'll pay me lots of money, and that will help my pension. But I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to stay healthy. I've got friends who have retired already, and they're looking old already because they've lost purpose. And may God give me the health and the strength to carry on doing what I'm doing for as long as I can, Nick.
A purpose is huge. It's such a powerful word. I know the final point before I kind of wrap up, sadly, because I could talk to you for hours, but it'd be the longest podcast ever. But so I guess you mentioned this kind of kindness, and I think it's a word that's very often bandied about on social media and stuff. But I think certainly at the moment, kindness and compassion need to really kind of rule, don't they? Especially through these challenging times of cost of living crisis, global conflict, all these things that we're kind of living and trying to survive and thrive through. I think kindness and compassion are the things that don't really cost anything. What's your kind of take on how you apply kindness and compassion to people?
I say to every client I work with, Nick, I call workshops the power of how are you? Because if in the corporate world, the person, whether it's a one-to-one meeting or a team meeting, started the meeting by from the heart saying to people, how are you? How are you doing? And they meant it and was prepared to listen. The more conversations at work we start with asking, how are you? How are you doing? Is the simplest and easiest way to create cultures where people feel valued and cared for. So I'm not trying to clone all people managers into fluffy bunnies. Some of them will always be very task focused and always will be.
Yeah.
But they can still start a meeting by saying to Nick Elston, "Hiya, Nick, how you doing? I know we're busy, but how's life treating you?" But mean it.
Yeah.
There's always time for that, Nick. Some people say there's not enough time for kindness. I'm sorry, there is, because when you do that, you drive more energy and engagement through the organization. Yeah,
absolutely. And actually, those kind of open leading questions, those emotionally led questions, like even how are you, is a really simple example of that, isn't it? It provokes a response which isn't just a yes, no, or nod. It's an invitation to kind of have a longer conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantastic. So the question I ask everybody that comes on the show and forms part of the playlist available at the end of season 5 is this. I am now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. 20,000 people have paid their hard-earned money to come and hear David Beeney speak. You're sat back in the green room, sipping a beer, and you hear me introduce you and call you to the stage. Then your walk-on music kicks in, that song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state. David Beeney, what would your walk-on track be and why?
I'd be sitting in the green room and I'd suddenly hear Chumbawamba, I get knocked down, but I get up again. And that would be me coming onto the stage, Nick.
Love that. That's such a great track. Such a great track to put on. Thank you so much. David, big round of applause. Woo!
Nick, we could have talked for ages and we must do this again. It's
Absolutely.
been a real joy.
This will not be the last time you feature for sure. And I want to get David along to one of my Find Your Voice events as well. So I think he'd be an amazing speaker to have along. So that will happen. You heard it here first. So big thanks to David for giving up his busy time to be with us today. For everybody else, I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. And next up, we have another wonderful guest in the shape of Jake Moore, cybersecurity expert and also a motivational influencer of ESET UK. So really excited to have Jake along and talking about his flavor of cybersecurity and how it works in real life, but also, as always, a human behind what he does as well. So for everybody else, take care, be happy, stay well, see you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye.